has this. I and another gentleman in the room came through the front door. If you don't normally come to these meetings, you would not know to go to the back door.
Yeah.
The security guard or police officer, I don't know what he was, told us that. So perhaps when you do this at night, just put a piece of paper on the door saying, if you're going to the meeting, please go around to the back
Yeah, that's a
door.
good idea.
Thank you.
Can we make a note to that? It's a good idea. I didn't
We'll
know
take care of it.
I didn't know it wasn't done. Okay. Would anyone else like to speak to the law at this point? Okay, very well. There will be other opportunities. We have no proclamations. And we do have a presentation from Mr. Burrows of the National Park Service. Frank, if you'd like to share with us your words of wisdom. No pressure.
Thank you, and I'd also like to thank Mr. Foley for inviting me out. I did a presentation for the tourism office a couple months ago to provide a progress report on what's been happening since the establishment of Harriet Tubman National Historical Park, and he invited me to come and offer a few words for you this evening and provide an update, so thank you for that. My name's Frank Barrows. I'm the superintendent at Fort Stanwix National Monument, and I'm also the project lead for the Harriet Tubman National Historical Park. A little bit about myself. I'm an Air Force brat, so I've lived all over this country. Prior to being here, I was in Boston, and I was working in New Bedford Whaling National Historical Park. And that's where I started my career in the National Park Service. That's relevant for two reasons to this new assignment at Harriet Tubman. Number one, that was a brand new park. I was one of the first park rangers that was hired there. And it was also a partnership park where the park had limited ownership of property, and we worked with partners the same way we will here in Auburn and the surrounding communities for the Harriet Tubman National Historical Park. So important to understand that in a brand new national park, when it gets established, there's no budget, no staff, no office space, and it's very typical for the Park Service to draw on nearby resources. So that's how I got involved in this project, but it aligns closely with my interest in the Underground Railroad. I started my career at New Bedford Whaling National Historical Park doing research on the Underground Railroad, and it's nice to come full circle and be reconnected to that story with Harriet Tubman. Although we are limited in our resources in our startup years, it's important to know that this park is now plugged into a network of support and assistance. We have support offices conducting research studies. We have what's going on, what's called a historic structures report, and that will inform the preservation of the Thompson Memorial AME Zion Church that the National Park Service now owns, as well as the parsonage next door. We also have a cultural landscape report underway that will help us understand the landscape of the South Street property and how we can best preserve that space and connect visitors to the story of Tubman through the resources represented there. We also have our regional office working on formalizing the relationship through what's called an implementation agreement with the Harriet Tubman Home and the AME Zion Church. And that agreement is the legal mechanism for us to be able to share resources, whether those resources are technical, financial, expertise, human resources. This is the legal mechanism that will help the park and the Harriet Tubman Home work collaboratively to manage that site, including the cultural resources, future site restoration, developing programs and visitor experiences, and general preservation of the property. So one of the questions I get asked all the time is, when will there be a fully functioning park? And that's a complicated question because I don't really know what that means. I don't know if that means when will we have permanent staff, when will we have facilities, when will we have public programs happening. So that's something that is difficult to answer, but we are providing support where we can with our partners at the Harriet Tubman Home. We help them with their annual pilgrimage event, And we also helped them during July 4th week because they were getting 150 to 200 visitors a day during that week. So there's a lot of interest in Harriet Tubman and her story, and we're able to draw on the nearby parks like Women's Rights, like Fort Stanwix, and pull rangers in to support those kinds of events and build capacity for our partners. So I will just briefly tell you kind of the 4 main categories that our work is falling under at the National Park, and then I'll open it up if there are any questions. One, understanding the resource. I mentioned those 2 studies underway. It is important for us to really understand the resources that are represented by this national park, and important to build a strong foundation for a national park that will last forever. Formalizing the relationship, I mentioned that agreements process. Right now we're in the final stages of that with the Harriet Tubman Home and the AME Zion Church. And when that agreement is completed, then we will have the legal mechanism in place to provide further assistance to them. Preserving the Thompson AME Zion Church and the parsonage is also a high priority. One of our other support teams is a preservation crew that we have on site. I was just there earlier today. They were meeting with the researcher who's doing the historic structures report and going over some of the structural history that the researcher has discovered, and working with the preservation crew to help them understand some of the research that will inform their decision making in the future. It's kind of like riding the bike while you're building it. And finally, engaging students. We have a partnership with SUNY ESF, using the park as a real-world example for students to learn from. There was a design studio where students were able to create some recommendations and options for future site restoration. It's important to understand that these are not National Park Service plans that will be implemented. These are opportunities for students to learn. It doesn't mean that we might not use some of the recommendations that come out of these student exercises, but it's a way for us to work with our local academic institutions and students. So that partnership will continue as we continue developing the site. So with that, I would just like to say that the National Park Service is really proud to be part of this community. We're proud to be preserving the legacy of Harriet Tubman for future generations, and we look forward to working with you and the partners and the surrounding communities to make that happen. Thank you.
So are there questions? Mr. Lattimore.
Thank you very much for the presentation. Years ago, we tried to put, along with Harriet, William H. Seward's property. At that time, the Emerson Foundation didn't want to release it, but I think those two go hand in hand. And do we expand on the park in the future if we can?
Well, I think that park, if I'm not mistaken, is a National Historic Landmark, so it's which is administered by the National Park Service. They will be a critical partner in interpreting the story, and it's similar to working at my old site, where we had partners that were not named in the legislation establishing the park, but they are critical to us telling that story, and they are partnerships that have developed over time where we've done things like collaborative programming, doing programs in each other's spaces, and it'll be important as the park builds a foundation document, which is the first major planning document that the park will work on, that those partners are brought to the table. And that's one way to include outside partners in the park moving forward, is to include partners, especially those with strong ties to the story, like the Seward home in this case.
Okay. I will allow the questions because of the nature of the presentation. So,
First of all, my question is this: the AME Zion Church owns the home and all of that?
Yes. So they are still property owners. We are working in partnership with them on the South Street property. So they own They still own the properties, but it is now within the boundary of a National Historical Park, which changes the rules in terms of their decision-making moving forward. So part of our general agreement with them is that we will cooperatively manage that site, we will share resources, we will provide matching funds for projects from construction to visitor experiences. The Park Service owns the Thompson AME Zion Church and the parsonage now. So all of those resources represent the National Historical Park.
Excuse me, no. That we have another question here, Grant.
The Maryland Park, and it's been opened up, and are you coordinating stories, or how, is there any partnership between both ends of the road?
Yes, there's a lot of opportunity for collaboration there. In fact, we're looking at what kinds of things like exhibits and even digital programming that they've developed that we can use here on site. So right now, they don't have a permanent superintendent. They're in the process of searching for one right now. And when they have a permanent superintendent in place, we'll be communicating regularly and looking for as many opportunities as possible to collaborate with them, because really that's the story of the landscape where Harriet Tubman grew up, where she returned several times to help enslaved people find freedom. And here is really her story that most people don't know about, her life and freedom and how she continued to fight for equal rights here in this community and fight for women's suffrage and continue that spirit of just helping people. So they will be our most distant partner, but very important as we move forward.
Did you have one more question?
If they own it, what is their financial liability? Paying the ground,
Well, in our agreement with them, we have the ability, and this is something that is still not finalized, but the establishment of the park gave us resource sharing capabilities in terms of in collaborative projects. They will have to demonstrate a 50-50 match. So this agreement that's in process now is the legal mechanism for us to do that. And we will tuck what's called task agreements under that implementation agreement. Those task agreements will be on a project-by-project basis, and they will contain the specifics. So if we're going to do an educational program, that will be one task agreement that goes under this cooperative management agreement. If we're going to do a site restoration or preservation project for a facility, that would be another task agreement.
Okay, great, thank you. Okay, so Frank, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, would anyone like to speak on the law at this point? Okay. Also, do we have any public to be heard? Any legislators have anyone to introduce? Or is there anyone here who would like to speak on any other topic? Okay, thank you.
Minutes for approval, June 15th, 2017, and June 27th, 2017.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any changes or all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Dr. Durant was unable to be with us tonight, but Dr. Dobell is here. I don't think he has a formal report other than what the Dr. Durant has submitted, but he is here to answer questions, if anyone has any. Does anyone, Mr. Lattimore? So I guess you come forward. He was hoping to stay seated.
Dr. Durant sent his regards. He's taking a well-deserved vacation this week.
Well, I just, one of the long-term employees that the college had was Peggy Savage, and just wanted, relate that her passing. Also, her husband was a legislator here,
Yes.
Peggy was always very critical to the college.
Absolutely.
But, I mean, the Institute for Application of Geospatial Technology, and I know that, Mr. Chairman, I don't know whether or not you could maybe do some research on it. I mean, Congressman Walsh brought that facility to the property, and I'd like to see it continued, and I asked Dr. Durant as to, and everybody has nothing to do with it, but I know that Mr. Brower's mentioned that he's going to retire,
Right.
and I'd just like to see that jewel in the crown of Cayuga County continue.
Yeah, Brian is on the board, Dr. Durant is on the board of the IAGT, and I'm not at liberty to comment on the longevity, what the status is of that. I do know that Bob has just mentioned that, and that's common knowledge. So that's still being discussed.
Well, I'd like to see, I mean, NASA is, I mean, it's not too often that NASA comes to your town, and the last thing we want to do is have NASA leave this town.
Of course.
And I'd like to see us put up some kind of efforts to keep it here. So I don't know whether, if we can collaborate between the ledge and the college to move that thing forward.
Well, I will forward your comments on to Brian when I see him.
Right. Thank you.
You bet.
Any other questions? I agree.
Just a quick comment. Thank you for your support this last budget season. We're grateful to the legislature for everything you did for us. So on behalf of the college, thank you so much.
Thank you. So committee reports or individual reports from legislators? Ms. McGann.
I just have a couple small items. I've reported in the past about urging county residents to sign up for HyperReach through Cayuga County 911 services. If there's ever any sort of emergency, people can be notified through cell, by text, call, or also through their email. So if you no longer use a landline, I encourage you to please sign up and so that you're prepared. And in terms of water quality, you may have seen the report that harmful algal blooms were suspected at the Wasco Yacht Club. So this is maybe a few weeks sooner than we anticipated, but they closed the beach if they see it, and they are going to test for it. They test for it after the fact, but they close immediately if they suspect it. So just so you are aware, I'll be bringing updates next month also to see where we are at with water quality in terms of Wasco Lake and their pads. So I just wanted to say that tonight.
Thank you. I'll point out, too, that there was the blue-green algae in Cayuga Lake as well.
Yes.
Ms. Foley.
Just in regards to Emerson Park, I went to 2.5 events up there this past month. I went to the county fair, which was across the street, but you parked over at the park. The county fair was, I thought, all right. I went to go up and pet the alpacas, and the lady says to me, "They're acting kind of squirrely today, you better watch out." So I went for the goats instead. The second event I went up to was the Rhythm and Blues Festival, and I thought that was really well done, and if we could have more events up there like that, that would be great. I don't know what Gary thought, but I heard it was well attended, and the park it was rained on the day before and flooded in some areas, but they did a pretty good job of maintaining. And then the third event that I kind of stumbled upon was called the Bonton Roulette, and that's a 7-day event where people come from Cortland. They bike with their bikes. They go up and they stay at our park for one night, and they sleep overnight in tents, and then they bike up to. They were going up to Geneva the next day, and they're still on the road. And it's really an amazing event. It's an international event, which I was unaware of, but they really appreciated being able to use the park, and it was really neat to see. Like, there was 400 people that participated in the program through the YMCA. And there was like 200 to 300 tents parked in Emerson Park, so I thought that was neat. Anyway, that was Sunday. That's all I have to report.
Great, thank you. Any other reports, Mr. Baxter?
Yes, as Chairman of Public Works, I'd like to commend our Highway Department for all the work they've done over the last 3 weeks with the storms that have kind of ruined a lot of our roads in the south end of the county. They worked most of the 4th of July weekend. A lot of material, a lot of men, a lot of hours. I'd like the legislature to consider in the near future of transferring money to the Highway Department before we get into spending all our paving money on just road repairs. And I'd also like to thank all the towns, highway departments, and firehouses for all the work they've done.
Great, thank you. Mr. Lattimore?
In regards to the algae blooms, they seem to be coming more frequently. Last week I spoke at the city council for a moment in regards to what we're doing with the watershed on the south end of the lake, which took us 10 years to finally get permitted, that we should put in some coffer dams at Finesse Brook and Sucker Brook, which is close to the intake, to the drinking water for the city of Auburn. And I'd also asked sewer and water to put together a master plan in regards to having at least 2 other sources of water in case these lakes and the intake valves are clogged with the algae blooms. And I'd also like to just mention that Bruce Clifford's passing. He left the city and then worked for the county. So I'd like to just put his name in the records as an employee of the county.
Thank you. Mr. Weather?
Mine is more of a question, and I believe there was discussion at Ways and Means, but I wasn't able to attend. The Assessment Relief Act, are we planning to participate in that or not?
We're going to discuss it later, yes.
When is the deadline on that?
Well, we're going to discuss, that will be part of the discussion. I think it's August 25th?
It's in August.
24th.
Okay, so we do have time.
Yes.
Okay.
Mr. Baxter?
Yes, I was remiss in not mentioning our stellar EMO office that was down there at every turn, at their every waking moment. So I appreciate their help.
Yeah, absolutely. Any other, Mr. Forrest?
As Chairman of Health and Human Services, I had very interesting meetings with Kathleen Cuddy and with Ray Mazzari, getting much better understanding of just how important those departments are and how big they are. It's very informative. And I wanted to give people a heads up that this evening, under new business, I'll be reintroducing the motions that got tabled in May, authorizing Phil for staff development supervisor and Phil for social services attorney.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. So, my report will be fairly short because I think we have quite a long agenda. I too was going to mention, and I will echo what Mr. Baxter said. I think the flooding in southern part of the county has put a strain on resources, both locally and the county. Our highway department has responded. Our emergency management office has responded. They've worked long hours, and they're to be absolutely commended. And as are all of the citizens and the public officials in the part of the county who have been have their hands full with infrastructure repairs and problems. As I reported last month, the work that needs to be done on our shared services plan is such that I reported last month it was likely that we would push that off until 2018. And so we will be doing that. I will have a formal report to you all on or about August 1st, as required by the law, and I'll be convening the group within a week or so to actually go through the formal process of voting and so on. But I wanted to give you a heads up tonight. In addition to the floods, we're involved in a search process. We're beginning our organizational examination, been involved in lots of activity. But as I say, the agenda tonight is pretty long, so I'll stop here and see if anyone has any specific questions of me, which I'll be happy to answer. Mr. Lattimore.
Mr. Chairman, one of our big bills annually is our health costs, and one of the representatives she works for Blue Cross Blue Shield. I'm not on the consortium board anymore. You excuse me from that board, but she represents 14 states, and I'm just wondering which board or presentation, I mean, I think the whole board should hear as to where the world of health insurance is going. I don't know whether a short presentation here would be better for all of us to hear or just the consortium board.
I guess I don't know who you're talking about or what presentation you're referencing.
Yeah, I mean, she's an expert and she handles 14 different states.
Is this someone you know, or is this someone
Yes, it's
in a relationship with
friend of mine.
consortium?
Friend of
Oh,
mine,
okay.
and I think it might be good for this whole board to hear what.
Well, since we work through the consortium, my suggestion would be that perhaps we ask the consortium if to pursue that. I mean, that would make sense to me if it has to do with health insurance.
Yeah, and I know that the telemarketing, Zach Zuckerman was here from Key Bank to update us, but, I mean, the Ways and Means is a small board. I mean, I couldn't stay, I had another commitment, but...
Well, that was through the consortium. That's what I'm getting at. They are our health insurance. Why don't we do this, since why don't you give the consortium, give someone some more information, we'll follow up on it.
Well, I'd just like to have the whole board understand where the health insurance...
I do understand.
That's good.
But yeah, so that's what I'm saying. If you can get me or the consortium some more information, we'll follow up. Any other questions? Okay, great, thank you. We have no appointments or reappointments, I don't think, do we?
Nope.
Okay. Communications and announcements, if I could have a motion to dispense with the reading.
Move it.
Moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Okay, I'll pause again now to see if anyone wants to speak on the local laws. Very good, thank you. Our regular monthly resolutions. Ms. McNabb-Coleman.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to present 1A and 1B. They've been through committee, and I'd like to see them pass through here tonight.
Okay, does anyone object to handling these together? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? We have one opposed. Mr. Pinckney.
WM1 was added on 7/20. It's addressing increasing the rate of taxes on sales and uses of tangible personal property and of certain services, and on occupancy and of hotel rooms and amusement charges pursuant to Article 29 of the tax law for New York State. So this is just to address the state, and the governor finally approved the county's 1% sales tax extension. So this must be completed and processed prior to November 17th in order to extend the county's 1% sales tax. So this was added to the agenda this evening.
Okay, so could we have a motion and a
So we need
second
a
for this?
motion.
Move.
Second.
Is there a motion and a second? Is there discussion? Mr. Dennison.
I've had discussion with Fred, which is why he's smiling and laughing. This is just doing what we've been doing. God, I know, you told me lawyers. I hate the wording, because it sounds like we're...
Right, yeah.
Right.
that's not- We have to do this every 2 years?
Every 3 years.
3 years, yeah. And the,
Can't you lawyers figure out a way to change the wording?
We're afraid to. It might not pass.
Okay. Any other questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Excuse me, thank you.
Debitum 2 is added, 7/2017. This was born out of discussion at Ways and Means, authorizing the chair of the Cayuga County Legislature to enter into a contract with CNS companies to prepare a property development study. And this needs to be moved.
Okay. We'll have some discussion on this. Mr. Whitman?
I just want a roll call vote.
Okay.
I'll second it.
Wait, don't need one roll call vote, we do a roll call vote. We don't even have to vote on that.
Thanks for the support, though, Mr. Lattimore.
Always glad to help.
So, is there any discussion on the motion? Mr. Denson?
Yeah, if we're gonna do something like this, I mean, earlier, there was a presentation from Wendell that some of us sat in on. I just think that we need to have more than one. I mean, competition makes the world go around. And we need to look at not just what it would cost to build a new building, but what it would cost to renovate the old building. And we need to have at least, I realize why this is being done, but we need to have at least 2 or 3, in my opinion. I mean, I know Wendell gave us an estimate that some don't think is real. So let's get a real one if we're gonna go this route. So this present time, I guess I don't support this.
Mr. Pinckney?
I won't be supporting this either, only for the fact that when I asked the question of what the $4,600 entailed, I believe that if we're serious about doing something with this building or another building, once we move along into the procedure and the process, that'll be part of the money spent that will spell all of that out. So I won't be supporting it for that reason.
Thank you. Ms. Foley?
I'm still hoping, similar to my request from at Ways and Means, that this can go back for another month, as it's not an emergency resolution. We can send it back to committee. It doesn't appear that that's what's going to happen, and I will be voting no for that reason.
Mr. Lattimore?
Mr. Chairman, there has been some other buildings that might possibly be available. Instead of having elevators and that, it might be better to have it on one floor. And some of that space is probably cheaper than to build new. And I'd like to see us explore some of that if we could.
Okay. I'm not sure if that has anything to do with this particular motion.
Right. Well, we're exploring one. I'd like to expand that exploration in regards to existing buildings, new buildings,
Oh, okay.
renovated buildings.
Right. So you're not opposed to this, you simply want a more expansive look?
Well, if we expand it, I'd like to see some competition, as was mentioned.
Oh, okay. Mr. Baxter?
I might have missed it, or maybe they whispered, but I didn't hear the motion and second for this.
Well, I think that's what Sheila sent me a thing, but my understanding is this was moved and seconded at Ways and Means, so it's a report from committee, or no? Did I
Yes,
misunderstand that?
technically.
Wasn't on Ways and Means agenda.
But it was moved and seconded there, was it not?
It was moved to have Fred draw up the,
Forgive me then.
yes, sir.
In that case,
Consider
good.
yourself forgiven.
Thank you. Could I have a motion?
Move in.
And a second? Mr. Mahoney, thank you. Okay, thank you all. I was mistaken, so. Okay. Are there any other comments, questions? Okay, so we had a request for a roll call vote, so we would do so.
Yeah, when ready. Tucker Whitman?
No.
Andy Dennison?
No.
Ben Vitale?
Yes.
Grant Kyle? Paul Pinckney?
No.
Aileen McNabb Coleman?
Yes.
Joe DeForest?
Yes.
Terry Baxter?
No.
Joseph Bennett?
No.
Craig Reginelli?
Yes.
Patrick Mahonik?
Yes.
Timothy Lattimore?
No.
Michael Diddy is excused. Ryan Foley?
No.
Keith Bevan?
Yes. So I
Defeated.
believe that is defeated. Okay. Does that conclude your report?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, Health and Human Services. Well, wait, before we go on, I don't think it's the case, but let me ask, is there anyone who wants to speak to the law, the two laws? Okay, thank you. Now, if we could move on to Health and Human Services?
Mr. Chairman, we have 15 resolutions. I'd like to bundle them. They've been through committee.
Okay, anyone object to bundling the 15? Okay, in that case, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Mr. Foley?
Mr. Chairman, Government Operations has 2 resolutions. They've both been through committee and Ways and Means, passed unanimously, and I move them forward tonight.
I think we'll need to separate these because one requires 2/3.
Right.
But if we can start with then
GO1.
GO1.
GO1 authorizes Cayuga County Clerk to fill the position of Cayuga County Historian part-time and advertise to fill this position, amending comp plan and amending 2017 budget.
Thank you. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Opposed.
Mr. Jensen's opposed. GO2?
GO2 authorizing the amending of the county attorney's 2017 budget to provide additional funding for building and fire codes officer. This does require a 2/3 vote.
Thank you. This regards 2/3, but anticipating there's going to be little or no opposition, is there any discussion? So, discussion. Yes.
We discussed this, obviously, at committee. We're kind of hands tied here, no matter what. If we run over, but you didn't anticipate it being a huge dollar amount to start with.
Right. So I'm anticipating that the shortfall will be about $4,000. There's a change in the contract to up the rate to cover some of his expenditures. That passed after the budget passed, and I did not anticipate that when I put the budget together at the end of 16, that there would be additional funding required.
The
I hope to
bottom
get.
line, we can't not pay the
Well, you
person.
can always not pay our bills,
Well,
I guess.
yeah,
It's not a good practice, but.
It's not like we can
Right.
find another code enforcement officer for the last 2 months because we're deciding not to pay this one.
I'm not sure where you get the money to pay the next
Well,
code enforcement
exactly.
officer. Yes, exactly.
Like it or not, we kind of got to do this.
Yeah.
Any other questions? So all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Thank you.
Okay, I think that's unanimous, and therefore 2/3. Thank you. Planning.
Mr. Chairman, Planning has 4 resolutions. All 4 have been through both committees. I'd like to offer them as a bundle. Seek your approval.
Does anyone object to bundling these? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Tim's opposed? He raised his hand.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Tim, are you opposed?
I'd just like to make a statement in regards to the solar. I would like us to have at least 2 proposals on that property. And I think there was one mentioned before the regional planning and those 2 proposals.
No, it's too late. It's been approved. We'd have to,
It's there somewhere.
we could, do you want to, we approved this, so do you want to make another motion to
Well-
modify this in some way?
I'm all in favor of solar power, green energy. As mentioned before, 2 proposals are better than 1. And I think, regional's doing a pretty good job, but I'd also, like, I believe when I was chairman, we had other proposals that I brought to Chairman Chapman at the time to look into. So I'd like to have 2 proposals if possible. Does this limit
that's not-
anybody else from giving a proposal on that
That's
property?
not possible for this project. Now, what we could do if the project moves forward and there's a proposal to use the land for something, at that point, we could go out for bid, I think. But this is not, this does not look at the kind of RFP process that you're talking about.
Well, I don't want it to be a closed situation, just the regional. I'd like to see.
Well, we entered into, to be clear, there was an RFP process. This went through a significant process that included members from Capusa, as well as other members in the county, who requested and vetted, I think, there were initially 6 proposals.
At least 6.
And those, from that RFP process, a partner was chosen. So there has been an RFP process that involved a variety of partners. I think I'm not sure, I think if what you're suggesting is prior to entering into a final agreement, that we should re-examine our options, I think this leaves us free to do so. Because that's the way I would read it. So the time to bring that up would be at the point at which you're ready to move forward, or before then, but once we move forward with this, if I understand correctly.
Well, I think in the committee, it was brought up that maybe a Canadian outfit versus a U.S. outfit, whether the panels are made in the U.S. versus China. So
Well, I think it'd be U.S. and Germany, wouldn't it? With solar.
China makes a lot.
Do they?
But anyways,
Yeah.
I just want I want the program to be open
Okay.
to
Okay.
other vendors.
Okay, noted, thank you. Okay, Public Works?
Mr. Chairman, Public Works has 2 resolutions. They've been through both committees and approved. I would bundle them unless someone would like them separated.
Does anyone want these separated? In that case, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Judicial and Public Safety.
Mr. Chairman, before I get into resolutions, I would like to extend some gratitude to Deputy Dan Emmy and Navigation Assistant Kevin Gauthier for their assistance on a situation on Cayuga Lake, and would like to request that we do a proclamation and have them at the next meeting for saving a gentleman's life.
Great.
Going forward, Judicial Public Safety has 4 resolutions. 2 were pulled at committee. We have JP 1, 2, 5, and 6. I would like to offer them as a bundle unless anybody would like any separated.
Does anyone want any of these separated? Okay. In that case, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you. Okay, before I close the public hearing on the local laws, last chance for anyone who has any comments, input, insight, or opinion, or simply would like to come up and say a few words. Okay, in that case, I'll close the public hearing on the local laws. So no, let's consider these now. Let's do the local laws now. So we need a motion, or these we don't? Okay, so if I could have a motion, I think we can take these together, since they're so closely related. So if I could have a motion for these laws?
Don't you want to separate? Don't you want to separate 1 and 2?
You mean because of the amendments? No, we don't go nuts.
I'm pretty sure you.
Okay, so we have a motion in a second. I think we do have some amendments on local law 2, Ledge 2. So, Mr. Foley.
It's on me. Okay, so what I'm going to do is, we have amendments that Fred suggested at Government Operations to tighten up the law, and he swears on everything that they have to be introduced and voted on tonight. I'm going to do that, or at least attempt to do that, and bundle them. But first, we have to make sure that legislators understand what the amendments are and go from there. So, Fred, can you just explain why this needs to be done tonight?
Well, would it be
So-
helpful for Sheila and Amanda to pass out additional copies? I know they were circulated on the 11th of July. Would it help to have additional copies in front of you? The local law that you have in your table for Ledge 2 is the one that was circulated through the committees last month and this month. There are some proposed amendments that I think that Mr. Foley is asking that I walk everybody through. So I'm asking, would it be helpful to have those amendments in front of you as, I assume, Mr. Foley, you want me to walk people through this?
Yes, if you could. I mean, I'll discuss the amendments, and then you can say what they are. We'll go from there. We'll kind of
So
bounce
you'll
it up.
start and then I'll explain?
Right, beautiful.
Let's just have.
We'll tag team them.
Yeah, yeah. Well, if I may suggest, is that if we're going to have Fred explain them, is it necessary to do it that way?
Well-
Have Brian say these and then you?
I think someone has to offer them up.
I would be, I can go through them, because
And then
somebody
Ryan.
has to go through these unfortunately one at a time. And if you want to listen to me for the next 20 minutes, I'll be happy to do that. Then we can take questions as we...
No, Ryan will go faster than
Right.
you. Ryan will go faster than me. This is not criticism. for
No,
you.
no, I understand. I understand.
Yeah, these are the ones that have been circulated, and they were discussed in government office. They've been in the box. They've been circulated. So it's nothing new in that respect, but does have to be done.
So Fred, these do have to be done out loud. We can't just say, legislators, here are the edits that were made. We want to offer all of these edits up as one group amendment and go from there.
I'm smiling because everybody knows how particular I am, right?
Right.
So since I'm that particular, it needs to go through one at a time. And the example I would give is when you have a budget amendment, what do? You list the accounts, the increases and the decreases. This is very similar to that. I know it's dry, dull, and boring. One way to do it is to do it this way. Consider the amendments tonight. The other way is to look at these, adopt them, have them go back through a special meeting to set a date and time for a public hearing sometime later in August. You heard the chairman talk about the not the vacancy review group, but the group has been put together to start interviewing candidates for the administrator. If my information is accurate, I think the interviews are going to start on the 7th and 8th of August. So it would be better, in my opinion, to have it done today rather than have it done at the end of August, because you're going to want the new administrator candidates to have the most recent edited local law, I think. That's my thoughts.
Okay. So,
Mr. Russell.
Just to clarify, the plan is on the 8th and
Thank you.
Yeah,
Mr.
that's not
Russell.
relevant to this. Oh, thank you. But-
Well, my point was it needs to be
Yeah,
done sooner rather
yeah,
than
we
later,
understand.
so.
So Ryan?
okay, so we'll start this, and we'll see where it goes. The fourth line on page 1 says repealing, it was changed from amending, which was deleted. Fred, are we good so far?
We're good so far.
Beautiful.
What he's doing is taking the page number, there's numbers on the left-hand side.
Point of process. If someone has a question, raise your hand. Otherwise, let's just go through these, because I
Very
think, guess Pat has a question.
I have a question, not a question. I'm gonna make a motion just to bundle this. I know it's against your advice, but this seems ridiculous to go through this line by line if we don't need to. And you can, I can make the motion if no one seconds it, that's great, but.
I'll second it.
So the motion is to adjust the local law as distributed, with the specific changes of deletions and additions, and as previously discussed in government operations and placed in the box. Okay.
Do it.
Okay. Do we have a second? I'm sorry.
Yeah, I
Second.
Okay,
Couple.
Mr. Denson. Okay.
We also went over this here, if I recall. I don't remember if it was a Ways and Means or whatever. But there was a meeting that we went over, we had like this stuff up on the screen and we changed.
Yeah, that was a different thing.
That was a
but
different thing, yeah.
But yes, we have, your point is well taken, which is we have talked about this
Yeah.
and talked about it and talked about it. Mr. Lattimore.
I brought up in committee my concern about the administrator would be the risk manager of the insurance program of the county government. Now, I've been around for a little bit, and I've worked with different managers, and some managers have a feel for that, and, you know, like we have a consortium. I'd like to have the county manager work with, I see Mr. Foley shaking his head no, but it's a, you know, one of our large purchases is our health bill, and another large one is the risk management, the workers' comp program. And some administrators need some assistance in regards to that, and, you know.
Okay, can you reference where it is,
That's,
what we talk about here?
Page 3.
It says 34, 35, and 36.
Page 3,
I think.
line, sorry.
Got it.
Yep. But if this is an indication as the all-powerful one person without some kind of input from the board, I don't know. I'm concerned about that.
Yeah, I think the way this reads, and we can change this certainly, but the way this reads it is to assume line authority and supervision, the over risk, a number of things, risk management. This is not a change, other than it's been combined into one thing, as I remember.
That's correct.
This has been the case.
It's in red, so is that
The
not a
change-
change, Fred, or no?
The change is that, well, Fred, you can address it.
The change, if you look over in the right-hand side of the page, it shows you which paragraphs were combined in this case. From the local law that's taped to your desk, I believe it's going to be paragraphs J, K, and L. Those 3 paragraphs were combined into one new paragraph. It just seemed to make more sense, rather than have 3 separate, just put it into one paragraph.
Any other comments? Are you ready to vote on the motion? Joe, you had a comment?
I think we should at least consider this as being a member of the search committee. It did come up that you know, when we redefined for the job search what the duties of the administrator would be, that they would have ownership of the budget, and that they would ultimately be, I guess, responsible for it. But there was some talk that perhaps what's stated in here, like in page 2, 44 and 45, where it specifically talks about the administrator being a budget officer. And then later on in page 3, line 6 or 13. And there was some discussion that maybe based on this law, that there was a discrepancy between what the will was at one point and what the law is saying here. I'm probably not explaining myself very clearly, but.
You may be very clear, I just don't understand.
Well, budget
This is not a change. There's no change in this. This is even the language here is, this is exactly what
Right,
it
what
was
we
before.
wondered was, I think, were we at cross purposes with what we were actually seeking in an administrator?
I don't know, it'd be up to the body if you want to amend it.
Do you recall that?
Yeah. Do we have an employee now that is called the budget officer or not?
No.
Okay. That's
A
where-
budget officer is the person that, in effect, the CFO of the organization.
Okay.
That doesn't mean that person does the budget.
That's where we were going.
Right.
Is we wanted that more clarified, that this person is not solely responsible for making the budget and saying, here it is. This person is solely responsible for taking the budget and moving
Implementing it.
implementing it with the
Well,
department
and presenting
heads.
it. Someone has to
Presenting.
present it to
Yes,
the legislature.
we don't
That's
want-
what this person does.
We don't want a potential new administrator to look at this and think that they're the ones that are making the budget owning the budget, administering the budget, that's where we came from.
I don't know, do you have language to, Mr. Mahunik?
I sat on a couple of these discussions, and I think we've beaten this thing up pretty good. And I think that they've been very receptive to the feedback they've gotten from people on that committee. I just assume we get this thing passed and let's keep moving forward instead of getting down into the weeds where we don't really need to be.
That's fine by me. Like I say, it was brought up during that meeting, and I just thought now's the time, if we're ready to pass it, is that something we need to take a look at? If the body doesn't feel there's a conflict, I'm fine with that.
Okay. So you're not offering an additional amendment?
I'm not sure what the amendment would be.
Okay. Right, that was my question. Okay. Mr. Foley?
Yeah, I have one additional amendment to add, or more accurately delete. It's going to be on page 4, and that's going to be, let's see here, line 23 into line 24. So that paragraph, starting at 21, what's in red, says the annual performance review shall be chaired by the chair of Government Operations Committee, who shall be responsible for developing a framework for performance review that will be approved by the committee and by the administrator. I'd like to remove "and by the administrator" and just keep it as the committee.
Okay.
And I have spoken about this with Fred, just to get clarification why the administrator would approve of their own performance review, and just seemed odd, so I do offer that.
Well, it's not, it would be quite the contrary. It would be odd for a chief executive or a senior person in any organization not to have input into how the review is done. However, if you want to make that let's handle this separately, if that's okay. If you want to make that as a motion.
Yes, but I mean.
I'll second that.
Okay. I mean, it's responsible for developing a framework for performance review. They're not responsible for any framework of their own performance. They don't get to sign off on it.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying, right. So
Right.
the motion is to strike that, and we have a second.
Right.
So is there discussion to fundamentally to remove the participation of the administrator into the process, the framework, the input into his or her evaluation? That's the impact of this. Mr. Denson?
They're not evaluating themselves, they're just basically helping determine what the framework of their evaluation would be, right?
Right, that's this wording. But
Well, because I've asked the question, what about if they disagree with that framework when the legislature wants the framework in place?
Well, then I think you got a bigger problem.
Considering what's happened with our...
Okay, let's let Mr. Mahunik speak.
I believe there's a motion on the floor to offer these as a bundle, and there's been no amendments in a second on an amendment that I've heard yet, so.
Yeah, there was.
Who had the second?
Yeah,
Tim Lattimore.
Mr.
Oh,
Lattimore.
okay.
Yeah. Okay, so let's vote on the amendment, and then let's vote on the package. So the amendment is to strike the administrator as participating in the framework for evaluation. So all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
You want a roll call?
Can we leave the?
Well, we may need a roll call because of the way to vote, so.
All set? Yep. Okay, voting on the amendment. Tucker Whitman?
No.
Andy Dennison?
No.
Ben Vitale?
I would ask for some clarification, because I'm wondering if everybody understands this, what they're voting on. Voting on,
Switch my vote.
if you're agreeing with the amendment or not, and if that's the case, I'm voting no.
It's on
Yeah,
the
that is
amendment.
correct. We're voting the amendment is to strike the the administrator from the process.
So your vote's no?
Yes. That's the change.
Grant Kyle?
No.
Paul Pickney?
Yes.
Aileen McNabb Coleman?
No.
Joe DeForest?
No.
Terry Baxter?
Yes.
Joseph Bennett?
Yes.
Frank Reginelli?
No.
Patrick Mahonik?
No.
Timothy Lattimore?
Yes.
Michael Diddy is excused. Ryan Foley?
Yes.
Keith Batman?
No.
Defeated.
Okay, are we ready to vote on the package then, as presented? Hearing no other discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Mr. Lattimore is opposed. Okay. We will need an executive session, but before we do an executive session, let's discuss the, whatever the action, the tax break action, whatever that's called. Fred, if you could bring us up to speed on that.
So the governor has signed Chapter 85 of the laws of 2017. That's been distributed to everybody. That act has three parts. I'm just going to go through the three parts fairly quickly. The one we're interested in is Part B. The first part basically sets up, Part A sets up a grant program for small businesses, farms, owners of multiple dwellings, and homeowners associations who have, and municipalities who have been damaged by the storms. The storm is defined as an event that occurred between April 1st, 2017 and July 1st, 2017. It's primarily directed to the Big Lake. In Part A, there's some relief for the storm damage that occurred in 2017. So that's Part A. Part C is some income tax breaks for property owners whose property was damaged in this storm. And again, the time frame is April 1st of 17 to July 1st of 17. They're potentially eligible for some breaks on their income tax purposes. So we're not really concerned about that. Part B is the opt-in provision. That would require the county and any other eligible municipality to opt into the process. The process is called the, let me get the title right here, the Lake Ontario and Connected Waterways Assessment Relief Act. What it provides is, and I'm going to look to Kelly to make sure I don't get anything wrong here, the provision allows property owners who have been damaged to file an application to have the assessments on their property reconsidered. And again, it's that storm period between April and July, to have the assessed values adjusted based on the damage to the property. That would impact on the taxes. That may generate some refunds for the property owners that have paid school taxes or town taxes, depending on whether the county adopts it. It has to be adopted by some date in November, which I think provides enough time for the county to adjust its taxes based on whatever work the assessor may do. But again, it's the municipalities have to opt in. For instance, the village would have to opt in, the town would have to opt in. This is in Tucker's district, and the county would have to opt in, as well as the school district. If a municipality or entity chooses not to opt in, then it takes a whole different type of analysis. And I know I've hit this very high level and quickly. What it would require is the county to consider adopting a local law. The local law has to be adopted, as I said earlier, prior to August 24th. Your next meeting is August 22nd. So what that would involve is having a special meeting, for instance, the week of August 7th, where you would set a date and time for a public hearing to be held on August 22nd, and to consider adopting the local law at that point. I know I've hit this pretty fast and at high level. Are there questions?
Mr. Dennison.
This is strictly for the North Country then? This has nothing to do with the storms that has affected the southern end of the county?
That's my understanding, because the storms that affected the southern end of the county occurred after July 1st.
Okay, but what, I guess, where are we with FEMA then? And the other thing is, I don't know, Neil's, yeah, he is here. Like I asked him lot of what's going on up there is gonna go on next year, even if there's not storms, because it's not all storms that's causing the flooding problems, so.
Whether the state legislature entertains any enactments for next year, I don't know. It's too early to tell. I understand your question, your point.
Mr. Whitman?
Just a bit of a clarification on a few things. When they review the assessments, is this just going to be a one-time, one-year relief, or is this ongoing and gets reviewed the following year?
I'm going to push your question a little bit, Tucker, because I'm not sure. Let's assume all the municipalities opt in. There's a procedure whereby the homeowner has to apply to the assessor within a certain period of time. The assessor would make a determination. If there are repairs done to the property after that, and I think this is maybe where you're headed, then the assessor, if the repair is made, then the assessor has the ability to reevaluate the properties. They're supposed to do that every year. So, and I'm making a little bit of this up, so presumably if there's a building permit, the town assessor would get access to that and then could change the valuation of the properties based on any additions or changes that were made to the property.
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
It answers that part. My second part is to play the county legislative role here, not Sterling's representative so much. This being something that our state has said, this is going to be some relief to you, the homeowner, the property owner, the business owner. I assume that they're going to reimburse the lost tax revenue to the local municipalities, the county, the towns, and the villages, who this is going to be affecting financially.
There's language in the law about school districts and that issue, but there's no language in the law about the impacts on the local districts.
So this is a classic state riding in on their horse to save the day at the expense of the local municipalities.
On the other hand, you know, one of the things that Fred talked about in A and B, the state is giving income tax relief for this.
I'd be curious to see which one's bigger at the end of the day.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. No, yeah, you know that. And the state is making the disaster relief available. So the state is doing some
They are
stuff, but
doing
you're
their part.
absolutely right. It's
They're handing out other people's money.
Exactly.
Yeah, we talked about our Ways and Means, and basically, from my understanding is that they'll give the relief at the expense of the rest of the taxpayers in Cayuga County. And a number of us express our concern with that. And so, because of that reason, I would not be supporting it.
Well, and one point of clarification that maybe someone asked, do we have any idea of the extent of the damage?
I do not.
Okay.
I don't know if there are any FEMA records
I
that are
don't
out
think
there,
yet.
but I don't have any idea.
I asked recently, but Terry?
Yes, Fred mentioned that the southern end of the county is not included in this, but it goes through July 1st. The big storm that hit the south was July 1st. So I don't know.
Yeah, I spoke with the state about that today, and the answer to that, according to the office that's administering that, is it's unclear, uncertain. But it's definitely July 1st. As you know, there were a series of storms. Anything after the 1st is not covered for sure. Whether or not that damage on the 1st would be covered is, according to the I can't think of the name of the office, but I have the name of the office and the guy I spoke to, is not at this point clear at all. And the other complication, I think, is the separate, as you know well, what happened on the 1st versus what happened on the 2nd, 3rd, on the 7th. And so but it's that remains unclear and will be unclear for a while.
Well, I'd like to say that I would, even if the south end of the county was included in it, as in the future, I would be against doing this for the same purpose of what you already said. The other taxpayers just pick up the burden of these reductions, and if the people that are damaged, if they do not repair their property, then they can ask for a reassessment. if they do repair it, they don't need a reassessment.
Hmm.
That's my position on it.
Mr. Lattimore?
Fred, do you have a recommendation? Neil, do you have a recommendation as the?
Fred?
I don't have a recommendation, other than if you're going to do something, you need to do it fairly quickly. The timeframes are tight. You'd have to have a special meeting in the first full week of August to set a public hearing by the 22nd. I don't have a recommendation.
Yeah, and if I may, in terms of Neil responding, our question, the question before us tonight is not whether or not to do this. The question before us tonight is whether to direct Fred to develop a local law, have a public hearing on that law and make a decision. And at that point, once we send that local law through committee, that would be the point at which we would turn to staff for recommendation. Yes, Mr. Lattimore?
Could this be phase one, and then phase two, is there maybe more legislation coming behind this? To make us
not now.
To make us whole later?
Not that I've heard. As you know, the state legislative branch is out of session till, what, November? So unless they're called back, and I'm not aware that they're being called back.
And as I say, I spoke with some people about that today in Albany, and there was no indication of that. That doesn't mean it won't happen. But Ms. Foley?
I mean, I think it's worth at least kicking around to moving forward for next month. You know, I mean, here's the thing. Ben and Terry bring up the point that sometimes other segments of the population have to support or prop up a targeted or a certain group of the population. I mean, that's certainly, there's an importance to that. They might not see it as beneficial here, but it is beneficial as a society that to help out a group of people collectively, the other group supports or props up the group. And I just wanted to make that statement because I think it's important that it shouldn't be like that, but it is, and it's beneficial as a society.
Okay. Okay, well, I think what we'll do, maybe we'll actually have a vote to whether to direct you.
To draft the local law.
Yeah, because I don't know how else to do it.
Set a public.
So I think that the only practical way to do this is to entertain a motion, if someone wants to make a motion, to instruct our county attorney, to draft a local law that would be presented at a special meeting, which I would set. I'd look at the calendar and set a date tomorrow. So that would be, if someone wants to make that motion.
Move it.
Who moved it?
Okay.
Okay.
Special public hearing.
We have to have a special meeting to set a thing for a special meeting. Okay. So,
Who was the motion on that?
And who's second?
Second.
You.
So all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, who's opposed?
Aye.
Baxter, Bennett, Vitale, Batman. And
Just a quick question. Fred, you said that it had to be done by the 24th?
It has to be, yes, it has to be
So
adopted
we
by
could do
the-
it at our regular meeting on the 22nd. We don't have to have a special meeting.
We
You
have to have
do
a
because it's a
special
local
meeting.
law.
Gotcha.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. All right. So I think that passed.
Try to get up.
Okay, I think, oh no, before we go to executive session, we had one more piece of business Mr. DeForest wanted to bring up.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion for the Human Services Resolution authorizing the county legislature and the Director of Community Services to create and fill a part-time staff development supervisor position in the Department of Social Services. This and another resolution were presented and tabled during our May 2017 legislative meeting as a result of the hiring freeze. My understanding is to reintroduce the resolutions. A motion must be made and seconded to proceed for each resolution. These resolutions were approved in Health and Human and Ways and Means Committee during the May meetings, and I present the motion to you and the legislature for your consideration.
Second.
So we have a motion to create and fill a
Staff development.
person. Okay, is there any discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so that passes.
And Mr. Chairman, the second resolution is authorizing the county legislature and director of community services to create and fill one social services attorney position in the Department of Social Services.
Second.
I'm sorry, who's second? Did you get it?
Tucker.
Okay. Okay, so is there any discussion?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I know we go back to May and all that. I'd like to know what kind of savings or what kind of reward do we see by waiting the additional 3 months or 2 months to creating this position?
Okay. Well, I think, is that question me?
To whoever.
Well, I think the reason for the hiring freeze was not to save money. The reason is to look at the impact of the state budget and see what impact might be going forward. What we learned from that is that we are going to have some substantial financial impact next year, but particularly the year after and the year after that. And that was the reason to take stock of where we are. It's one of the reasons I'll vote against this, is because it seems to me as we look ahead the next couple of years, this may in fact not be the highest priority. It may be, but we don't know what other positions are going to be coming through in the budget process in 2018. And that was the whole idea of the freeze, to begin to get a feel for that. And we did get a feel. We got a feel that indicates we're going to have some real financial problems as we look ahead. So that was the reason for the freeze. Mr. Dennison?
Was this, refresh my memory, to take the job of that this attorney would be doing out of the county attorney's office? Is that how this went?
No. This is a new position in Department of Social Services.
But who was doing it before? Who was doing whatever this attorney's going to do before?
It was done by the staff attorneys.
There's presently already attorneys in that department?
Yeah, there's 1.5 attorneys or 1 3/4 attorney in the Department of Social Services and part-time, how much? Half-time that does child protective? No, the office.
Yes, the social services stuff is primarily done in
Right.
DSS. We're doing Medicaid and child support.
So we're just adding another attorney, is
Yes.
what you're saying?
Right. Mr. Vitale?
I will not be supporting this. Last year, we had a discussion of why we moved attorneys into that department, and we were told that by moving the attorneys, we were going to resolve a lot of these problems. And now we find out that we have another attorney, and I guess it bothers me when we're promised something and then not delivered. So for that reason, I won't be supporting it.
Any other comments, questions? Are we ready to, Ms. Bennett?
I'd like to say I'm supporting this because it also bothers me when we're promised something that we're not given it either, because we were promised this position back in May and we were not given it.
Very good. Ms. Foley?
For those that didn't attend HHS during when this was originally submitted, do we know the ramifications of not supporting an extra attorney in his office or in that office? It probably is needed supporting child services cases or whatever may be. I'm not sure. I just want to know if anyone has that information to share tonight.
Well, the body has that information if they attended either that HHS meeting or Ways and Means or read the minutes. So,
Right.
yes, that's all available. Any other comments? Are we ready to vote? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
Aye.
So I think 3 opposed. Okay, so it passes. Okay, very good. So I think, is there any other business to come before the board before we have an executive session? Mr. Lattimore?
Under old business, Chairman, I had asked previous administrator to give us the impact of closing of the nursing home in regards to the dollar amount and the number of employees that were relieved from when we got out of the nursing business, and then our home health people, as to what that impact did for our overall budget. I'd still like to have that if human or HR. I mean, at one point we had 900 employees, and now we have 700 employees. Or I'd like to know where we are with the employee count.
Yeah, I think we did get such a report, but I'll see if I can find it. If we didn't, then you want the impact of the closing on employment and budget?
Yeah, how many employees we had when we were in the nursing home business, and how many we have since we've been out of the nursing home business? In the home health.
Okay, so that I'm clear, so I get the right information, because you've said two different things. We've added and taken away people unrelated to the nursing home. You want specifically the impact on the nursing home? How many employees were not?
What our employee count is now, and what it was when we had the nursing home. And
Okay, well, you understand that won't be all related to the nursing home.
But
We
I mean,
just approved the position here
It's nice for this
tonight.
board to know, when we change our operations, as to what it does to our budget, our bottom line, and to how much money we need to ask from our tax base.
Okay, I'll see. I think we had a report, but if not, I'll see if I can find it. And if not, I'll put one together, ask people to do so. Okay, any other business? Okay, in that case, if I could have a motion.
Motion to go to executive session.
Second, okay. So we're in executive session. I do not anticipate any action afterwards.